Unfortunately, the COVID-19 cases, as you may know, are surging in our country right now. It's bad out there, people. We know the communities of color are being particularly hit hard as the pandemic has revealed significant racial disparities that have actually been there for a long time. Now, joining us now is Dr. Julian Perez of Seymour Community Health Center. He is part of the COVID response for Seymour. And welcome, doctor. Good to have you here.
Good to be here.
Glad to see that you're wearing your mask.
Absolutely.
And in fact, you told us, wear your mask today, so we appreciate that. Let's start with that. I feel really irritated with a lot of people out there that refuse to wear a mask. In fact, it really pisses me off. Do you feel that way? I mean, you're the doctor.
I work at a community health center. We see all people that come through the door, no questions asked. We are a social justice founded place of work, and we really encourage our patients to wear masks. We call them in advance. We remind them when we call them, and we still get a few that don't. We have masks that we give them so that they can cover their mouth and nose, and even then some people can or won't, and they have their reasons. And so we just do our best to convince them and to motivate them to do what's best for the community and us, the clinic, the clinicians that are working there to take care of them.
So what do you say to people about wearing a mask, about the importance and what it means, particularly now?
Masks are pretty well identified now as a way to slow this virus down. The governor just gave a wonderful press conference today, and he laid out the evidence. And it's evidence that comes from all over the world. We know masks work. And they are not just a way to slow the virus, they are a message. They are a message to tell other people, I care about you, I care about me, I care about your kids and your family, and I'm gonna wear this because we can only do this together.
In the community that you serve, it's largely Latino. And what is the challenge that you face in getting the word out? And are people there listening?
I'm gonna answer that with a story. So we're family doctors, and we go into this because we love to hear people's stories. I remember in the beginning of March when this pandemic began, and we heard on the news that weekend prior to clinic opening on Monday that this was now community spread. And our medical director called us up and emailed us and said, be ready, you're gonna start seeing people in the clinic. We need to identify them, test them, and get them to care. At that time, the hospitals were preparing for the worst. We had outpatient settings that were being prepared for inpatient care. We had second, third, and fourth string doctors getting ready to do critical care work that they'd never done before. And when the patients began coming into the clinic, this was a disease that we'd never seen before. We didn't know how to recognize it. If you come in with a cold, if you come in with a flu, I know what that looks like. I can see that across the room, I know what to do. We didn't know what this looked like. And if we had known then what we know now, we could have isolated so many more people, but that was just what we were dealing with. And then around April, mid-April, Public Health King County called us and said, we have some very concerning news for you. The Latino community's statistics on their infection rates is double that of the baseline population in the state, and we find it to be the same in King County. What are you seeing internally? And by then, we'd been collecting statistics, and we found that our statistics were double as well. However, our baseline population is not 13% like the state of Washington. It's 47%. So we were around 80% of all of our tests positive were among the Latino community, primarily Spanish-speaking community. And so that was a huge red flag for us. We started to work much more closely with King County Public Health, and their ask to us was, we want to know what the community has to say. We want to hear from the community. And so we started to partner with the community with Zoom town halls, trainings for the promotores de salud, the community health workers. They are informal people who have the trust of their community, which is another pandemic in this country. People do not trust the authorities. They do not trust government. They don't trust the police. We needed to find who they trust. And we went to those people who had networks either virtually or in person and said, come to the table virtually with Zoom meetings, and we're gonna teach you and train you what we know, the facts, and then you go and train your people and all your networks. We started that, and in addition, we own and operate 2 radio stations. And we started to talk on the radio stations from day one and give the statistics and give people the best practices of wearing masks and maintaining distance and washing their hands. And we started to do radio novelas, which are you know, like
they're
soap operas on the radio,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
It's very traditional, very fun. You see it
Very
all over Latin
dramatic
America.
too, you know.
They're wonderful. And so we produced our own, and the nice thing about that is that what we produce, we actually put into a public box called Pláticas Saludables. And anybody in the country can go and pick those up and put them on their radio station.
Yeah.
So not only are we helping our own people,
spots,
but we're
right?
serving
they're
the country.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we found this to be helpful. I always ask the people that produce the radio stations and do the interviews with us every week, are the people really enjoying this? Are they bored of me? And they said, no. You're a doctor, and they like to hear from the doctors. And this is one of the best ways to reach out to the people. Because our folks are more or less labor force. They put the radio on the concrete, they hit the button, and then they just work all day long in construction, cleaning hotels.
The essential work.
Doing the essential work of this country. And I want if people take nothing from this segment, know that Latinos run this country. We build this country. We work our butts off. And we are part of this country. We demand and deserve the respect and the help and the resources that everybody else demands and expects and obtains. And we still do not get those resources.
That's right, damn right. But you've been telling them this all the time. They never listen to me. But now they do. They heard it
bet
from
you do.
Doc.
Oh, yeah. So really it's grassroots, like the way that they communicate with one another and are able to, like, you know, get that information about mass out and the way to kind of reduce this virus.
Yes. There's a phenomenon we refer to often in medicine and in public health called social determinants of health. And it would be very similar to the structural inequalities that create disparities in health. So we look at the overlap between Black Lives Matter and the Latino Chicano movement. We look at the intersection between politics and the disease burden that we have already prior to COVID happening. And what we know is that we only can do so much within the walls of our clinic. We have to get outside the clinic. And our clinic in particular, we dedicate about 13% of our entire budget to addressing the social determinants of health. And we do that with housing. We do that with political activism. Every year we're at Latino Legislative Day. We do that by running community celebrations like Fiestas Patrias in Seattle. And we do Christmas parties for the kids. We give tons of presents to the kids. It's all about confianza. And that word in Spanish means trust. If you have the trust of the population and the community, if they know that you got their backs, if they know when they're in trouble they can come to you, that is the most valuable thing in our community.
The other thing I think is important to know about CMAR is the fact that you operate really throughout Western Washington, but also up north as well into Franklin County on the other side?
We are Canada to Oregon, mountains to sound.
Right.
That's our
And when you said the two radio stations, one is here in the Seattle area. The other one is in Granger, Washington, and Central Washington.
It's an FM station.
And large 47% in Yakima County.
Right.
Why do you think Yakima County has been so problematic?
So Yakima County is a tough nut to crack, and I think you've got several things going on there. You've got a very conservative community, and not just among the Anglo-American citizen community. Our Latino community there is also very conservative. Most of our people are not coming here because they're on vacation. They're coming here because they have to. There's no work at home. They're farmers traditionally, growing, but they lose their crops because of climate change. They lose the markets because of very unfair trade agreements between the United States and Mexico, and they end up moving to the cities. They can't make it there. They go into non-traditional places of work, like selling things on the street. They go up to the maquiladores on the frontera, and they can't make it, and so they end up crossing the border, and they look for work where they can send money home. Oftentimes, their families are being extorted. They're being ravaged by gang violence and narcotraficantes. And so they are here to work and send money home and bring their family here. And it's the American dream, right? I mean, come to America, make it. That's what people want. They want to be part of this country. And so in Yakima, you still have a very conservative base of Latino workers in the fields, in the meat processing factories, in the agricultural processing factories, and very religious. And so you have that baseline. They agree with the Anglos in many things. But the problem is that they're not a full part of the community. We have our folks who are working in these areas where they don't have 6 foot distance. They don't have masks. And the first outbreaks were identified in Tri-Cities and in the Yakima area in meatpacking plants. So what happened at the federal level? They didn't say shut those down, send in public health, send in OSHA, clean it up, make it safe, reopen when you can. No, the president said meat is important, and you're going to keep those places open and keep operating. And so that just goes to show you the xenophobia and the racism in that decision. We have experienced the effects of a white supremacist culture for many, many decades, since Mexican people crossed the border after the revolution of 1910, during the Bracero movement in the 50s and 60s, and again now when violence is ravaging all of Latin America and people are escaping. People really are refugees of violence. They're refugees for economic reasons, and it's important that the people that they live with understand these pressures that are driving them north to immigrate and look for a better and safer life.
I think understanding this history is just like as we are today with the issues of Black Lives Matter and understanding what the experiences are of black people in this country, but the brown people in this country have been there putting in and building this country. And this is very, very important to understand at this part, because we're still the essential workers that are keeping everything going today.
Correct.
From construction to feeding people every day. Yep. And that's why we are important in this society.
Yeah, and so Doctor, I want to say, with so many of the Latino community sort of disproportionately on the front lines, and you know, there were reports that in Yakima you had workers or farm workers who did not want to actually get tested because they were, you know, scared that they wouldn't be able to work. I mean, what does it say about this country when you have to choose livelihood versus health?
It's a horrible decision to make. A lot of our folks are undocumented. They work without papers, or they have work visas that are very, very fragile. And if they don't show up to work, there's someone right behind them that's ready to take their spot, and they'll lose their job, and then the family doesn't eat. That is a reality of all of our patients at the clinic. We are on the western side of the mountains. Not as much farm work in our clinics that we see, at least in the King County area, but north and south, a lot of farm work, and definitely back in the eastern side of the mountains. What I think is that we need to find ways to reach out to the community and make them the experts, make them, have them tell us what the answers are. And we've begun to do that with these trusted advocate calls, where we're looking at the community and asking them what's going on. And I term it el porqué. We know the statistics. We know that in the beginning, you know, we're 13% of the population. 26% of the disease burden is when we were notified by public health because they were convinced that this was happening. We're up to now 44% of all the positive cases that have been collected in the state of Washington are among Latino community. So this is very concerning, and the trend is going the wrong way. We need to find ways to stem this, and it's not going to necessarily happen by people at the top making decisions. It may not even be data-driven. It needs to be community-driven, and that's why we're reaching out to folks in these non-traditional ways, going to the folks that have the confianza and the trust of the community and asking them what's going on. Why? El porqué. Why is this happening? You tell us what to do, and we'll marshal the resources, those of us who have privilege and have pull with the decision makers and the purse.
What are you doing in trying to reach out to the community as well to get them to understand that, okay, when you finish working on a weekend, you can't just go home and have a party and relax and call your friends over? Because I know that that's still a challenge in communicating that.
This is a challenge for everybody. If you take a look at all the states that are now in the last 7 days having the biggest spikes and the booms, right. Florida, Texas, Arizona, California. I mean, it's not just Latinos that are having this urge to go out and party with their friends and have barbecues.
Well, that's for sure. Just look at the beaches in Florida and everywhere else.
So I want to make that clear. This is not particular to the Latino community. Yeah. However, we are a very social group of people. We love to get together. I had to stay in Seattle instead of visit my mom for her birthday. In 20 years, I had not missed my mom's birthday. That was a heartbreaking decision, but I did it because I love my mom and I'm not going to make her sick. Even though I can get a test before I leave town and head over there, I'm just not going to risk it. We need to convince people that the science is real. We need to impress upon them the importance that we are a community, even though the community at large does not want us here. That's a hard pill to swallow. Will you make the sacrifice to not visit family, to wear that mask, to keep the distance for a community that has actively hunted you down, separated you from your children, and doesn't want you in their country?
Particularly when you don't have the resources to have a different home. I mean, right? So often they're put in these conditions where you are with like 8 family members and you don't have the ability to distance, and you don't, you know, you go to a work where the business and the institution doesn't provide you with the resources, right? And like you're saying, it is grassroots oriented, and it is about trying to find the people that do have access to those resources and try to get, but it still seems so like such a huge challenge and barrier.
Yeah, you're exactly right. You hit the nail on the head. Because our folks are working and living paycheck to paycheck, oftentimes they find themselves in living situations where there's not enough space. We have regularly 3 generations in a house, 2 or 3 families sharing a house or an apartment. And when somebody gets sick and we give them the instructions on how to distance themselves and maintain isolation, quarantine, they really have a hard time doing that. They're not comfortable going to a hotel that the county would otherwise provide and pay for. They need to take care of their kids. Who's going to take care of their kids, right? And there's all these very real concerns. And this is not just among our undocumented workers that can't even read or write or speak English. This is our educated Latino families who have been here for 2 or 3 generations. That cultural value is still, I'm going to stay close to my kids. I'm not letting them out of my sight. It's very difficult to get people to make that tough decision.
What are you doing for yourself? I just want to mention too here before I ask you this question that for those of you that are joining us this evening, the doc is here to answer any of your questions or comments that you want to make. So, send us some if you want to. Yourself, I imagine you see COVID patients on a daily basis. How are you taking care of yourself? What's it meant to your life as a doctor?
Well, this has been the toughest situation that we have seen, I would say. The economic recession in 2007 was really hard as well. And it was hard because the state had to cut and cut and cut because we have a state mandate that had to balance the budget. All those cuts came off the back of the poor. Off the backs of the poor, off the backs of the immigrants, off the backs of the minorities. And we had to fight tooth and nail just to keep some programs just barely alive on life support so that when the recession ended, we could revive them and resurrect them. This is different. In those days, it was a budget issue. People could still work. People could still mingle. People still had the resources to be able to get that social connections and get through the day. Now our families have to isolate. They're not supposed to hang out with one another. They still have Zoom and they have phone and they have WhatsApp. They can talk with one another. But it's been very difficult for them, and me too. Most of the medical workers that you have talked to probably in some form are trying to maintain some distance from their families. I've been sleeping in the basement for the last 2 months. I toss all my clothes in the washer when I get home. I haven't kissed my wife on the mouth for 2 months. I hug my daughter and kiss her on the head. I mean, these are just basic things that we've had to change our lives to do. And it's becoming more routine. I mean, we're getting used to it now. But yeah, I mean, you have to find something to feed you. And so for me, it's been just being in the present moment, being mindful, listening to the birds in the morning when I wake up, reading this wonderful upcoming speaker's book. So many things that I find now that I have forced time to do that I didn't have before. And you just have to take good care of yourself. I definitely came to a point when I was not doing well, and I had to identify what was the thing that did it, and I addressed that. Things are better now. But I think every person who works in the front line, whether that be a grocer or a meat processor or a nurse, is going to go through this at some point. And you go through those stages of grief. You go through loss. You go through anger. You go through sadness. And you get to the point where you have resolve. You know what the problem is. You know what to do. And you know how to do it. And that is what drives me now.
So I have to ask you, Doctor, too, we just had record numbers of COVID infections the last couple of days nationally. We have now where you have COVID-19 patients being transported from Yakima to Western Washington hospitals. How concerned are you? What is the risk level that we'll see, with an additional spread that might have us, locked back up, relocked, back up and sort of like what Florida and we see Texas is now doing. Are
Right.
you scared that we will have to, phase out of phase 2 back to phase 1?
It's always a possibility. When you have tools, some of these tools are very blunt. And the governor today said that even in Yakima, even in the Tri-Cities area, they want to give them a 1.5, simply because if people don't have the grocery stores open and the gas stations and the things that they just need to get through the day and get through their weeks, they have to go to other counties and they take the virus with them. And so allowing just a minimum amount of opening and business and services available to the community is important, but you have to convince the community to wear their masks, to wash their hands, and to stay distanced from one another, 6 feet, 2 meters. If you can convince the people to do that, you can be together relatively safely. I mean, just look at what the Black Lives Matter movement did in the last 3 or 4 weeks. I mean, we had hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people in the street all over this country. there have not been outbreaks associated with these massive movements of people in the street. And so we know it can be done. We know we can live our lives if you wear this.
And it's convincing people just to do that. I mean, it is, I just don't get it, why people will not. It seems to be the smallest thing for us to do to be able to get control of this virus. So Dr. Fauci, Anthony Fauci, has said, and this is really tough to hear, that he expects us to maybe have as many as 100,000 a day dying, and that we don't have control of this at all.
So he's correct. We don't have control of this at all. 100,000 dead a day, I think, would be apocalyptic. I think possibly what he said was 100,000 cases.
Yeah, he said 100,000 infected.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Thank you for the correction.
yes,
Yeah.
if people don't change their behaviors, we can easily get to 100,000 a day. And keep in mind that people that were infected today are not going to show up in the hospitals for probably 7 to 14 days ahead of time. And so this second wave is here now. Everybody needs to know that. It is here right now. We are doing really good in King County, but our numbers are going up. Washington State's numbers are going up. Our hospitalizations are flat, and our death rate is still flat to going down. Why? Because we learned. Here's the golden silver lining. We've learned from wave 1. We know who's high risk, and we know how to keep them away. We've given them the message, and they got the message, okay? Now what we need to do is convince the young people, no bars, no parties, wear your mask. That is tough. And this is why. We have a young generation of people who have grown up their whole lives knowing the internet, being very resourceful on the internet. They don't trust their parents' generation because we've completely screwed up this world. We have fire season year-round in some places. We have so much mistrust. We have a very divided government, a polarized politics. Young people look at us as parents and as leaders of this country, and they just shake their heads and they cannot believe what's going on. And so when you have that many young people who are now out of school, had to come back from college, know that their parents or they are paying tens of thousands of dollars to get an education online now, it is just the breaking point. And when George Floyd was killed, that was it. You had a huge group of young people that were pissed off, there you go, pissed off, and were ready to do something about it. And that's what drove this. And this country will change because this generation is committed. They are committed, and they're smart, and they're resourceful, and they will risk a lot to make it happen.
But yet they're the ones that we got to get the message out to, that
You're right.
don't go party. I have a son who, we have this constant conversation, and he's learning, I think, the hard way. But what's it going to take to get them to understand you can't do this?
I think it's going to take a massive apology. We need to apologize to this generation and let them know, when you wear a mask, you're protecting us. Let me give you a reason to protect us.
I'm sorry,
I apologize.
Jini. I just want to apologize.
Yeah, I do. If that will help to get people and young people to wear a mask and to really use some common sense and help us. And actually, if it helps anybody to use some common sense right now, because it just seems to me it's the least we could do to try to help ourselves right now.
I think we underestimate our young people. I think they're brilliant. I think they're resourceful. I think they know what they're doing. And again, just like we are reaching out to the community to find out el por qué, why, we need to reach out to young people and say, you can fix this. We can help you. You tell us what to do. We give you the resources. Let's fix this problem. They are breaking down racial barriers in this country. They are forcing the conversation. They can fix this COVID crisis, but we need to ask forgiveness and step aside and let them help us figure this out.
So, Doctor, I have to ask you, I know you said that obviously there are younger people who are trying to fix this crisis and so forth. We do have some states, shall we say, that have, and especially their governors, who have acted very irresponsibly. I know there are a lot of people who are saying, well, even if Washington gets it right and the West Coast gets it right, well, there still are other states who aren't getting it right. Mm-hmm. And the holidays will be coming up soon. The summer's coming up soon. People travel.
Yes.
We, obviously, because of the Commerce Clause, we can't stop interstate travel. So how can we, truly halt the spread when there are, quite frankly, just so many people who are still acting very irresponsibly around the country?
You know, we ask our people on the radio this very same question, and they do admit that there are some irresponsible people out there. They don't believe that the virus is real, or they feel like it's not going to happen to me. And until it happens to them and their families, that's when you see real change. And that is a hard lesson to learn, and it's very frustrating for us to wait for that to happen to some people.
Right, and how many other people have to be sick and come ill with this virus before that happens?
Well, ask the governor of Texas. This is a Republican governor that just told everybody, you will wear masks. It took a lot of carnage in his state to take that step. He's now breaking from his party. He's breaking from the president's lead.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, fortunately for us now, I mean, people are starting to say, there's just common sense that's not so common, right?
Right. Well, hopefully they can use that in North Dakota, where on the 4th of July they'll be the president will be doing a event where the governor there has said that masks are not required. So we shall see.
I think they just need to talk to the people of Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Let's hope that common sense becomes a pandemic at some point.
Sure,
Doctor, thank you so much. Thank you for what you do, and because you're putting your life on the line and doing all of this. You know, thank you to your wife and your family that are putting up with so much, but thank you for everything that you're trying to do for the Latino community, but for everybody, and thank you for taking the time to talk to us today. We
You're
really
welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
All
Thank
right.
you to all
Thank
the
you,
people
Doctor.
that we work with and make this possible.
All right. Thank you very much to Dr. Julian Perez for joining us.